Why is there such a fuss over the SAVE Act and the idea of voter ID? I mean, it seems logical. You have to show ID when you purchase alcohol, to go hunting or fishing, your driver's license. Almost everything else in life requires some form of ID. So why all the fuss about a voter identification? Well, the reason many people, myself included, are against such things is because it opens the door to other things. I mean, right now, when you vote, at least in my state, you have to show your driver's license, and that should be enough. But what the SAVE Act is doing is going beyond that. Another reason this is so troubling is because of our long history as a country of suppressing votes, our long history as a country of limiting who can and who cannot vote. At the beginning of our U.S. experience, only white men who owned land were allowed to vote. Now, later, laws were modified to allow farmers and commoners the ability to vote, but still only if you were a white man. Early on, states were allowed to make their own election rules. States used that allowance to disallow white women, all blacks, Native Americans, and all immigrants, natural citizens, from voting. Some states even used that power to not allow Jews to vote. The 15th Amendment, passed in 1870, ensured that people could not be denied the right to vote because of their race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The 15th Amendment also enabled states to oversee elections as they saw fit. Soon after that, Mississippi passed a grandfather clause when it came to voting. This clause stated that only people whose grandfathers were eligible to vote before the Civil War, in other words, white men, could register to vote. After that bill passed, the percentage of black men who could vote in Mississippi went from over 90% to less than 6%. And still, women, all women, were not allowed to vote. During this same time, states passed poll taxes. That's a charge you had to pay to vote. Literacy test. You had to be able to read in order to vote. And English proficiency test. If you couldn't speak English or couldn't read English, then you could not vote. All of these were done to suppress African Americans, Native Americans, immigrants, naturalized citizens, and the low-income population from voting. The 19th Amendment, passed in 1920, gave women the right to vote, but only white women. In 1952, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Native Americans could not be denied the right to vote. Up until then, based on different states, Native Americans could or could not vote. The 24th Amendment, passed in 1962, outlawed poll taxes and extended voting rights to African Americans. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlawed voter suppression tactics and created federal oversights of states and localities with a history of voter suppression. This act also gave all women, all Native Americans, and all immigrants, again, naturalized citizens, the right to vote. The 26th Amendment, passed in 1971, allowed any citizen over 18 years of age the right to vote. Throughout the 70s and the 80s, the Voters' Right Act was expanded to require polling places to provide ballots in other languages besides English and to provide an interpreter as needed. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 required states offer mail-in registration and mail-in voting. And so this long history of trying to fight for people to have the right to vote was long and was hard fought and seemed to be going pretty well until 2013. In 2013, in Shelby County versus Holden, the United States Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965 by rolling back key provisions that require federal oversight of districts based on their history of discrimination. That opened the door to voter ID and proof of citizenship that we see happening today. Since 2013, there has been a concerted effort in our country to once again suppress the votes of certain people. And so today we have the SAVE Act that is making its way through Washington. The SAVE Act requires citizens to provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote in federal elections. So this is the federal elections. But what will happen is if this passes, it will open the door for states to do whatever they would like to limit who can and who cannot vote. Now, what this means by providing proof of citizenship is that when you go to register to vote, you are either going to have to show a passport or a birth certificate. Your driver's license is no longer adequate. This also requires that once you've registered to vote, when you go to vote, you have to have a government issued photo ID, like a passport or a real ID. Once you go to vote, you have to show them this government issued photo ID when you vote in person. Or if you vote by mail-in ballot, you have to provide a copy of that government issued photo ID with your ballot. If this bill passes, it will negatively affect minorities, the poor, the younger voter, and married women. And here's what we mean by that. A lot of people who are young don't have access to their birth certificate. Less than half the population has a passport. And so younger people may not know where their birth certificate is, or their parents, based on their income ability and education, may not know how to go get not a copy, but a birth certificate from the state in which you were born. That affects minorities as well. And here's how it affects married women. Your voter registration, your has to be your legal name from on your birth certificate. That means if you got married and took your husband's last name, then your driver's license or other proof of insurance, maybe even your passport, will not match your birth certificate. And so this affects, some people predict, as many as 21 million people, including the minorities, married women, and and immigrants or naturalized citizens. Reducing the voting rolls significantly. Now, what's lurking behind this in a very sinister way? What's lurking behind this move for photo ID is part of Project 2025, which is this intent that has been implemented in many ways to almost turn us into a theocracy. But in Project 25, and among some, not all, but some conservative evangelical Christians, is this idea that women should not have the right to vote. In fact, when women got the right to vote, according to this idea, that's when the United States started going downhill. And so we need to return or go back to, or for the very first time, institute household voting, which means one vote per household. And it's the man's vote who counts, not the wife's, but one vote per household. And some have even suggested that it should be one vote per household, but then based on the number of male children you have in the household. So if I'm a father and I have 5 sons, well, then I get 5 votes when I go to vote. Now, that part of I get 5 votes is not in Project 2025. But underneath all that, underneath this move to have voter ID is to restrict who can vote. And one way this is done is to move us back toward this one vote per family model. That is why. This is why anytime we hear of people who are trying to make it more difficult to vote, we should be wary and cautious. If you are a United States citizen, the most easiest thing in the world for you to do should be to vote. Any restrictions on who can and who cannot vote undermines democracy.